Hi, and you're very welcome to Inside Atlas, the podcast where we discuss the AI first approach to customer service for ourselves here in Trilogy Software. Today, we're going to be looking at Atlas Ticket, and I'm joined by Carlos, my partner in crime on the project, and the JavaScript whiz of our L3 team. Welcome, Carlos.
Hello.
So, Atlas Ticket is the first piece of the Atlas puzzle where we were not using VoiceFlow as the basis for it, but actually had our own system built. It interacts between Zendesk, Lambda, which is written in JavaScript, and then ties into our L2 bot, our L1 bot, which is ironically still in VoiceFlow, and also deals with automations and links in with a Google Sheet, which we'll kind of explain in a little bit later. So here we have Atlas Ticket. As you can see, the tickets come in either via customer directly, or it can come from VoiceFlow, Atlas Chat, if it was not able to resolve the query themselves. Once it comes in as a ticket, Atlas references what we call the SRT, which is the standard routing table, and it checks for a variety of factors. The first thing it does is check whether there are any special instructions. This is really key if there's an outage or if there has been a patch deployed by Microsoft that is interfering with one of our on-premises products. This very quickly allows us to triage that ticket and let the customer know that we're aware and what we're up to. Once it has gone through the SRT and the special instructions, the next thing it does is it checks to see what the ticket content is. It classifies that content and then checks to see if we need any more information to solve the ticket. So, for example, if somebody raises a firewall query, but we have no logs to go with it, then obviously we need those logs to troubleshoot. So it'll go back to the customer and indicate what it is that it requires. So once it gets to the automation phase, we basically know we have enough information. And if we have a process there that can actually do and take action on the ticket, that's where it will take place. An example would be if there was an expense claim coming in, we can send it to the automated expense processing system because we also use the Atlas Ticket and things like central finance. It's not just products themselves. If there are no automations and we have enough information, the next thing we do is try and solve at L2 or L1. If we have an L2 bot configured, then we will obviously just use the L2 bot. We won't go to L1 because there's no great benefit to doing so. If we don't have an L2 bot configured, then we'll do an L1 lookup. So the L1 bot would basically be past tickets, knowledge base articles. L2 would be those as well, but also would have the ability to review logs, make calculated decisions, and give a recommendation. So at any stage during this process, we can break from there and head straight back to the customer with a resolution or an update or something that they can use. If it goes through this process and Atlas is not happy that it can solve the ticket, and that's something we'll touch on, is the making sure that if it can't solve it, it doesn't try. We then will process that ticket into the agent queue. And depending on what the SRT has said, it'll either go to L1 if we think it's not a complex task, or it'll go to L2 if we think it is a complex task. That pretty much summarizes it, I think, Carlos.
Yes, you're right. That summarizes it in a very, very detailed way. Describes the whole process. There's one thing that we missed here. It's the fact that when L2 bot does recognize a task, it returns no answer and falls back to an L1 bot. Right. So we implemented that to make it more resilient.
Okay. So if the L2 bot is, we will allow it to run through both bots if the L2 one is not successful, just in case.
Yeah, just in case.
Yeah, because they are based on two totally different systems. So the L2 bots, for the most part, I think altogether, I think there might be 3 or 4 that exist in the company at the moment, depending on the product. They are based very much on in-house design systems. The L1 bot, in all cases, uses the VoiceFlow knowledge base and their API endpoint to query that knowledge base, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah. And that kind of makes sense because we're trying our best to solve the ticket, but at the same time, and we'll probably touch on it now, the necessity to make sure we don't try and solve it at the risk of hallucination. So we assign a confidence score, isn't that correct?
Yes, we check the quality of the responses that we get from VoiceFlow, and we determine if an answer can be created based on those responses that we get. And if it can, then we create it. And if it cannot, then we just route it.
Cool. Excellent. And it's a strange one, I suppose, because in a lot of cases we could have deployed the SRT in a database. And I know the JavaScript programmer on the other end of this call would prefer sometimes databases. But we went with, ironically, a very simple Google Sheet for the sheer fact that we were able to edit it so much quicker, and we didn't have to then maintain a front end on a database as well as everything else that we were doing.
Correct.
It's very useful when there are those special instructions in particular. So the special instructions are being expanded at the moment. I think it's in place now where they will reference, and Atlas Chat does this too, they will reference the outages page and say,
correct. This is already being implemented, actually.
Yeah.
We are now checking the status pages so that we can give greater context in our responses. And we can consider more factors when we create this comprehensive answer for a customer, especially on SaaS products, that we maintain on the cloud. That's very, very important. Yep. So we had to implement that.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense because then when there is an incident, we're not relying on somebody to update the special instructions. So now there's kind of two factors. We can have a special instruction which is just related to the outages and what's happening and what's gone wrong. But on the other end of things, we can also have special instructions for things that aren't an outage. They're not going on the status page, but they are happening quite a bit or something that we need to do. Or even if there's a delay in processing. So say, for example, it's month end, there is a delay in processing expense claims or something that we can at least say, look, we know there's a delay. It will be done in X number of days or something like that. And that's kind of been, we had a Microsoft patch rollout last week, actually, where the patch Tuesday, two of the patches interfered with one of our mail servers. And we were able to just put a little note that said, look, we're aware of these two patches. You can uninstall them. It'll work, but we are working on a permanent fix.
Yes.
And I think it was 200 and something tickets that it preempted out of the queue that otherwise an agent would have had to pick up. So no, that makes sense. And then in terms of the info check, this is one where you don't want to overcomplicate it, but with the same time, we had a couple of things where when we were testing, this was an interesting one in terms of, we know, for example, as I said, with the firewall, we need the logs and we need like maybe the license key for the firewall and a few other bits and pieces. But how do you quickly pass to Atlas what has come in the ticket? Because it can't read a screenshot, for example, in its early stages. Some of the L2 bots, I think the plan is that they would read screenshots, but we had to say, look, if you get a screenshot, consider it that they've given you enough information. I think that's how we ran it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the case. But luckily, we have an image processor available from OpenAI and an enhanced text processor, GPT-4/1106, which has enabled us to include file analysis in the level 2 bot. In both of our current level 2 bots that are live. Cool. So that's a very important thing. And when we bufferize images, we're able to convert that into something that the AI will be able to interpret and read and extract valuable information from.
Yeah, I think I do remember testing it on one of our CRM plugins, and we sent it a screenshot, and I actually diagnosed the issue because it was able to read in the error message that was in the screenshot. And the other thing as well that is really nice about the screenshot reader, and this was one of those ones where you don't think of it because you don't code anything. It's just something that GPT does naturally. But obviously our products, a lot of them are multilingual. And so we get a screenshot and it's of the language. So we'll get a German screenshot of the mail server and you're looking going, ich habe keine Deutsch, like, what am I supposed to do here? And so basically you just look and you go, oh, okay, the system translated it, gave the error message and gave a first draft of a resolution and actually responded to the customer in German, which when you're trying to quality control what the ticket system has done also adds fun and games. You have to translate your own work.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. And then obviously moving our way down, the automations. It's funny, the automations, while they sit within Atlas Ticket in terms of triggering, Atlas Ticket doesn't do the automations. It just, how we did it was we apply tags to the ticket and then Zendesk kicks the automations off itself.
Correct.
So,
Each of them needs to have their own automations, and that's completely in control of their DRIs.
Yeah. So yeah, we each have a directly responsible individual for products. So each kind of one has somebody that's there working on the automations and streamlining it. And then obviously the L1 and L2 bots, we've been through that. That's a kind of a very standard system of, like, the voice flow, it goes to our L2 and we process through. And in terms of kind of unexpected or expected issues that we have, what kind of sticks out in your mind as kind of the most hard to solve or the most...
There are many. I mean, we faced a lot of challenges to get to this stable version that we have now. We used to have an initial version that sometimes proposed a solution or committed to doing something that it could not do because, the AI tries to solve anything that it is given. So if it makes you happy, it will say that it will complete a task without being able to do so, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest challenges I had because I had to work around many prompt variations to finally give it the right context and the right, how would I say, positioning, the right position that it should adopt towards a given problem from a customer.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What we ended up doing, I suppose, is it quality controls the message it sends back, so we read the message it's proposing to send to the customer to make sure it doesn't have certain things in it, those kind of stumbling blocks we were used to, and if it does, it rejects it.
Yes,
Cool.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, excellent. And it's like, it is that kind of I know Benji and myself will discuss it at some stage soon as well. His bot, the way you have two bots kind of working in tandem, or more than two. And so basically you're like, and it's a bit like our agents. Our agents would submit work and it would have been QC'd by a second agent to be sure that it was the right work. We're doing the same thing here with two AI interacting together, or if the need be, it can go to the agent. And then I suppose Atlas Ticket has opened up a whole suite of other processes, because up until now it was customer tickets and just working their way through. But now if we have processes, we can run it through the same system. So in other words, as long as there's an input coming in, a Zendesk ticket of some format, we can run it through a pipeline, apply the SRT guidance. So even if it's like a finance process, we can apply the filter and how it should work, and we can then send it to its end location. And as long as we can write an automation, which is, as I said, it's a Zendesk tag, we have a trigger. That trigger calls a Lambda function. You can do whatever you want in a Lambda function. That was another thing that we did come across, though, was the length of time these take. So yes. Zendesk has a timeout waiting of, is it 30 seconds? Or is it 15?
No, 7 seconds.
Oh, even worse. And so what we ended up doing is two Lambdas. We have one Lambda that just triggers to call the other Lambda, and then it responds back to Zendesk. So we were able to let it work as sync. So when a ticket comes in, it sits in, I won't say limbo, it is being looked after at the time in our system, and it waits for, is it 15 minutes is the max timeout for the second Lambda?
Yes, it's 15 minutes.
So 15 minutes, if we haven't heard back, we just assume that the Atlas ticket has not found a solution, and we just send it on to an agent. But for the most part, our L2 bots come back in between 7 and 12 minutes. I don't think there's many where it goes much longer, because you're actually left with there's a limit in Lambda itself in terms of how long it can be active for.
I have customized it so that we listen for updates from the level 2 bot for 10 minutes, and we can either have an error or a response from the level 2 endpoint, and then we evaluate the next action based on the response from the level 2 bot.
Perfect. Yeah. And it was again, that was something else we kind of found very early on when in our kind of testing and stuff, because Atlas Ticket in one form or another has been going since the beginning of, since November, the first iteration of it. But the proper, as we call it, Atlas 2.0, Atlas Ticket 2.0 was December and went live on all products just in January.
Yes.
Yeah. And I suppose that's a complexity. Sorry, go on.
December 12th.
December 12th. Cool. So we'll have to have some sort of a commemoration for it every year.
I know it will.
We'll celebrate by not sleeping for a day to relive the feeling. And that's something as well, I suppose people may be thinking, well, why do you have an SRT that's so broad for, like, it's because it's not for one product. I think our list is 80 products thereabouts that go through it. So when its system is processing, it has to be able to handle that. If it's for a firewall, it's following the firewall path. If it's for the mail server, it's following the mail server path. If it's for a SaaS product, it's doing likewise. And so we very much, that was the reason behind, and I joked about it earlier, like that's why we went with not a database, but a Google Sheet. There are probably more efficient ways, longer term, but the sheer fact that we iterate so quickly. I mean, if you built a database for the SRT and a front end for the database, if you look at what we had from the 12th of December to the 12th of January to now, which is only 2 weeks after that, the difference is huge. So
Yes.
we would have added days to our development cycle, slowed down the iterations, and for very little gain. So as I say, yeah, maybe longer term when it's stable, you might look at it, but we have found it to be, I don't think we've had any issues with it being in Google Sheets.
No, we have not. We have not experienced any data loss also.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm yet to find out if we are facing, or if we will be facing limitations in the future. I'm not sure of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, due to our iteration cycles, moving to another layer, a front-end layer and a back-end layer, will be adding complexity, and it will take time. So
yeah,
it's not suitable for the way we work. At
yeah,
this
no,
time.
definitely not when, I mean, like, I know I'm still getting not phone calls, messages on LinkedIn and Twitter and stuff where it's like, hey, we'd like to talk to you about a bot that will revolutionize your support process. We will like mitigate 50% of your tickets coming in, or we'll streamline. And you're like, dude, we're already well past that. Like, thanks, but no thanks, and do you use Google Sheets? Is your system, I mean, to have gone from November, December, and now January, 2 months in, and the system is processing. As I said, I know we normally share this diagram, but this is the updated one for this week, and so the chart now has this at 59%. So you're like, basically, every 10 tickets we get, 6 of them are being solved by AI only, which makes things, it means that our agents are freed up to do more, but as well, we're pushing more through the system. So, for example, as I said before, the finance stuff goes through the system. We could run renewals, processing, anything really, because once you have an input and you want to run it through and an output at the end, it makes sense. Okay, cool. And any other hot topics off of it that you think would be useful for our viewers?
Of course, yes. Where will we be going next with Atlas Ticket? And I think that the next step for Atlas Ticket is integrating it with even more systems.
Yep.
Maybe we'll stop the reliance on Zendesk and just issue the request ourselves, or establish a framework in which we could integrate even more automations to Atlas Ticket directly, which will further enhance our process, the current process.
Yeah. No, and I think that, again, it's a bit like the front end on the database. When it's a polished system, you could start plugging more into it. The reason I like Zendesk and that side of things is we have one central place where we can track the process. So in other words, we know how many tickets we're solving. We know how many we're sending here for this automation, for that. It's one central location where we can report. But I do think there is a time save. Well, see, even then, like time saving, Atlas Ticket solves everything in 15 minutes or thereabouts, or it moves on. But there's definitely a process saving, and not moving it through Zendesk, but actually taking the process and just running it direct from Atlas.
Yeah.
And it'll probably tie in again that, like, every time we look at Atlas, there's a new part. So there's Atlas Core, which is just the general concept of Atlas and being applied. We have Atlas Chat, which is voice flow in essence. We have Atlas Ticket. We also have Atlas PRU. We have what we're going to talk about Benji with, which is Atlas Insights, which is where it almost comes full circle and the system goes to Zendesk and gets the information of what we've done and starts to strategically analyze what's happened on a product and what we should do next. So I think it's a jigsaw puzzle that ever expands out, and there probably will at some point be a system that goes over top. But at the moment, I do like the fact that we can iterate so quickly through it. Any other things?
No. We'll see where the numbers guide us.
That's true. Yeah, and I suppose that should be clear for people maybe watching who aren't familiar, who are maybe external to the company. We're very much numbers driven. So in other words, if you want to do something on a ticket, you'll never find us working on, and I'm trying to think, it was Sam actually said when we were talking about Atlas Chat, the 80-20. We will never first go to the 80% of the tickets that are 20% of the issue. What we will do is we'll look at the bigger volume items, solve those first so they have the biggest impact, and that frees up your time to do more. And to do that, again, it goes back to having the stats in Zendesk and being able to make the right decision. But yeah, the numbers will guide us. So at the end of our review, we maybe will, and again, this comes back again to Benji's system. Like Benji's system is now looking through all the tickets. It'll probably start telling us, well, look, if you could solve these 3 issues in the core of your product or in the core of your process, you'll save 80% of the time. So yeah, no, it's definitely one to be aware of. Yes. Excellent. Cool. Okay. I think we've covered enough Atlas and said Atlas enough times at this stage. And I'm sure there's probably a deployment that we have to go do for the next version 1.1.1.1. Well, no, we're on version 2 at this point. So we'll version 2.0001. But thank you very much, Carlos, for joining me. And we'll see everybody in the next episode. Bye now.